It's good for a speaker to begin with something light. Rabbi Perlmutter can teach you something about that. But this subject is a little too serious for that. Why I chose to teach Igeres HaKodesh Siman Yud Aleph, also known as the Lahaskil Chabina, which are the first two words. I told this story during Shiva at a little Farbrengen that we had here for Yud Beis Tammuz. That was, as it was, Ruvain Sorolnik spent much time at Cedar Sinai, which is about 3.5 miles from my house, and about 30 miles from everyone else's house from his community. The first few months, people made the trek, but it got harder and harder. It's a 3-hour trip to go from Long Beach to visit someone, to come back, and it wasn't easy. For me, it was a hop, skip, and a jump, and I was always Ruvain's friend. I humbly was his mashpia, unworthy as I am to be a mashpia of a person of that stature. And I was with him during the 14 months that he spent in Cedar Sinai in one stretch, and then on and off too many times over the years. One time Ruvain said, after I was there to put on film with him, I have a question in Hasidus. You have a few minutes? And I said, yes. And he told me he was learning the Lahaskil Chabina, which we're going to learn soon. And I have a few questions. The Lahaskil Chabina is a letter from the Alter Rebbe, which is as stark and as blunt as can be on the subject of human suffering. It is to the point. Generally, the subject of suffering centers around the Holocaust. However, many tragedies for an individual or for a family is their personal Holocaust. And the stresses and the frustration and perhaps the anger is no different. And regarding the Holocaust, there are all sorts of explanations, all sorts of theodicies and philosophies. Many of them, even from good people, engage in fuzzy thinking, not to confront the question most directly, where was God during the Holocaust? God did this, and God did this, and the people, it beats around the bush. Many of them, including from some respected thinkers, and mostly the ones that I am critical of are of the 20th century thinkers, not of the earlier philosophers, the classic philosophers. There's a blunt letter from the Rebbe on the Holocaust to a Holocaust survivor who was a leftist member of the Israeli Knesset, where the Rebbe says, in no uncertain terms, God was the mastermind of the Holocaust. You don't hear any of the other articles that you've read over the years about the Holocaust. You've never heard that. The Rebbe says that bluntly and unequivocally, and how could any rational person think otherwise? Why? That might be unknown. I'm using that as an example. In the Lahaskil Chabina, the Alter Rebbe also says bluntly that if a person is frustrated, angry, miserable, questioning because of a tragedy that overwhelms him, he should know that he lacks in his faith in God, he lacks in his acceptance of the good God. And we'll learn that shortly. Ruvain had learned Lahaskil Chabina. He understood it well. He didn't have a great philosophical question, as it is an emotional subject as well, especially for him. And he asked questions, detailed questions, of how to internalize it for himself. And I did my very best to answer him, finding the right words so that he might take it in. And after I left the room, I went into the hallway and burst out crying. I burst out crying for my own inadequacy, realizing had I been in his shoes or in his bed, would I have spent my time struggling to understand how to fine-tune my mind and my heart to be consistent with the extremely high standard that the Alter Rebbe sets out here? I don't know. I hope never to know. But in the presence of such purity and such truth and such commitment, I was overwhelmed by his greatness and my own inadequacy. But when you see someone like that, you are inspired. And you know that the standard exists, not just because the Alter Rebbe says it, but because there are people who strive to reach there, and some people achieve it. Without mentioning names, though many of you will be able to figure this out, there's a person very close to me who was told by his family doctor that he had two older brothers who were both struggling with different diseases. He was in his early 50s then, and the doctor told him, both of your brothers are not going to make it. Prepare yourself to become the patriarch of your family. Growing up with two older brothers all his life, he's the baby. Even if he's 50, he's still the baby because the big brothers are the ones who are going to take care of things. And he heard this. The doctor's prediction was true, was accurate. And I think, the yahrzeit of these two young men who were in their late 50s and early 60s was just in the last week. And he did assume the role of patriarch of that family. It's a big family. And he told me that he learned the Lahaskil Bina. After all this happened, he knows, everybody in Lubavitch who is conversant in classic Hasidus knows the Lahaskil Bina and knows how challenging it is to reach that level. And he learned it. And he learned it the first time, and he got angry at God after learning it. And he told me he learned it a second time and a third time. He learned it 10 times over the next few months until finally he reached a level of acceptance, not only of acceptance, but that the message of the Lahaskil Bina gave him support. Then there's another story which took place 112 years ago at the bris of our Rebbe. Yud Ches Nissen Tov Reish Samach Beis. The Rebbe was born Yud Aleph Nissen. A week later on Yud Ches Nissen, he had a bris. The bris took place in the home of his grandfather, Reb Meir Shloimeh of Nikolaev, the Rav of Nikolaev. It wasn't a catered affair. But there was a meal. It has to have a meal, a Sudas Mitzvah. And what was Reb Meir Shloimeh's wife's, what was the family name? Anybody else? Yanovsky. Rebbetzin Yanovsky prepared the meal. A Pesach meal. She had a strictly kosher home. At the bris, they noticed that Reb Osher Grossman, also known as Reb Osher Nikolaev, was not eating. And the other Hasidim chided him. You don't trust the Rebbetzins kashrus. That was before it said in Hayom Yom that on Pesach you offer, but you don't insist that people eat. But the Hasidim didn't know that yet. And Reb Meir Shlomo overheard them chiding him, and he said to them, truth is, I should also get on his case. In Yiddish he said, ich darf ihm geben in Tatens Taten herein. But I can't translate that, it's too complicated. But forgive him, let him be. He saved my life. When did he save your life? He said, when I had typhus a few years ago, and typhus, it was a very contagious disease, and they didn't have whatever medicines are necessary in that time. They didn't have it to treat these people. So basically, when a person contracted typhus, which itself was quite contagious, they quarantined that person in a sanitarium, and all that was left was to pray. Somebody came in once a day to check on them, to remove those who didn't make it in the last 24 hours, and to give them some food. Reb Meir Shlomo was one of those who got ill, and when Reb Usher came to visit him, they said, sorry, no visitors. It's too contagious. They're not allowed to let anybody in. Which room is he in? They told him which room he is, and he had an idea what the closest window to his friend's room was. And he went outside that room that day, and he learned out loud the Lahaskil Chabina. And Reb Meir Shlomo inside was listening. And he did that every single day until Reb Meir Shlomo overcame the disease, the infection, and came out. And he said he was lying there all alone, isolated, without energy, burning up in the typhus fever. And then he heard this voice, and he heard what he was talking about. And the idea, as we will soon see, that nothing that happens to a person is without plan, and nothing that comes from God is not good. Everything is good, even when things seem terrible. And that got into him. He heard it once and again, and that eventually encouraged him, together with God's blessing, to fight back, and eventually he came to the conclusion that it was Reb Usher's learning this Lahaskil Chabina that saved his life. So even though he maybe should be eating at my grandson's bris, but forgive him. Okay. So this is from this third section in Tanya, the fourth section in Tanya, Igeres HaKodesh, holy epistles. I don't know why they use the word epistle, because nobody who speaks English knows what the word epistle means, except when it's used in Tanya as holy epistles. It means holy letters, sermonetics that the Alter Rebbe sent sometimes to individuals, sometimes to communities. Lahaskil Chabina, and there's a lot of cliches, rabbinical cliches. Lahaskil Chabina means to make you understand, or wisdom. That's a pasuk in Mishlei. Other phrases are from other biblical and Tanakh sources, but that's how scholars wrote in those days, using the flowery phrases, and it's more than just flowery phrases, but there's often a lot of wisdom in the choice of words used. Lahaskil Chabina, to teach you wisdom, and if you're not that fluent with the Hebrew, you might as well just follow along in the English. This is not the way in which God's light shines. To want a material life, and included in materialism is bane u'mezayna. children and sustenance. Children, having a family life is a necessity. Having food to put on the table, having a roof over your head is a necessity. But that should never be the focus of a person's life. Because regarding such matters, the desire to have a decent balabatish life, regarding this, the sages said, Batal ritzayncha, nullify your will before God's will. God's will is paramount, your will is insignificant, and your will should be subsumed in God's will. Dahainu sheyiyeh, this is as clear as can possibly be. Sheyiyeh ritzayni batal b'mitzias, his will should be totally nullified. And he should have no desires at all in worldly matters. B'inyani olam hazeh, in matters of this world. Kulam, all of them. Hanichlalim, which are generally categorized in the three general categories: bana, chaya, or mezayna, children or family, life, health, and life itself, mezayna and sustenance. Ukamayim razal, and as the sages say in Pirkei Avos, al karchach atochai, it is against your will that you live. And the Alter Rebbe's interpretation is, this physical existence in which we engage in every day and every moment is something that we are engaged in reluctantly as a duty. God said live, we live. God says eat, we eat. God says have a family, we have a family. What do you want? Only one thing, to serve God. If that's part of the service of God, great. If that doesn't work out, fine. This is what the Alter Rebbe says. Ubiyarinian, clarification or explanation of this matter. Hurak emuna amitis b'yotzer bereshis. It is only with true faith in the how does he translate? Some of these phrases are difficult to translate. Right, good. The translator didn't translate it either. Good. He had the same problem. In the one who formed Genesis, that would be a literal translation. Yotzer bereshis, he who formed Genesis, or the Creator. Dahainu, meaning shabriya yesh me'ayin, recognizing that creation is something from nothing, or again, they so use the Latin term ex nihilo. Nobody knows what ex nihilo is. If you don't know what yesh me'ayin is, you don't know what ex nihilo is. Hanikra reishis chochma. The yesh me'ayin means something, existence. Broadly speaking, the entire universe, time, space, everything is created by God. Me'ayin, from nothing. And the word nothing has two legitimate interpretations. Nothing means absolute nothingness. God created existence where there was no existence before. He didn't take something else and transform it into existence. He said, it might be a little oversimplified, but God said poof, and the world was brought into existence because that's what gods do. Another interpretation of ayin means it is as naught because we don't understand it. We don't understand God. We don't understand how creation takes place. So the ayin is actually referring to God, but not God. But we refer to him as ayin, as the transcendent God who transcends our understanding. So God created the existence from the transcendent God who is beyond our comprehension. But within God, when we have put it Kabbalistically into certain names, Hanikra Chochma, Hanikra Reishis Chochma, the Creator is called the foremost, the primordial, and it comes through the sphere of Chochma. V'hi Chochmasai, and this is the Chochma of God, not just wisdom, but a lot more than wisdom. Chochma da'atzilis, she'ena musagas l'shum nivra, which is not understood and grasped by any creature, by anyone created. And habriya hazais, this creation, hi b'chol eis v'rega, it's constant every moment. Creation is renewed every moment. It's not that God created the world once 5,773 years ago, but it's an ongoing process every moment. This is elaborated on in the first few chapters of Sha'arei Yichud Ve'emunah. Shemeshavim kol habruyim yesh me'ayim v'chachmasi yizbarach. All of creation and all creatures are created from nothingness, through God's wisdom, hamachaya es hakol, which gives life to all. Ukishi yisbeinin ha'adam ba'emek havanosei. When a person should meditate in the depth of his understanding, v'yitzayir bedaitei, and he will form in his mind havayosei me'ayin liyesh, his own being created from something, from nothing, b'chol rega v'rega mamish, at every moment. We were just created out of God's will. Hech yala al daite kiraloi, how can he consider that there's anything bad happening to him? Or shum yisurim, or any suffering, mibana chaya mazayna, from any of the family life and sustenance, or sha'arei yisurim ba'olam, or any of the other sufferings that people go through. Hare ha'ayin, behold, it is the ayin, the Creator, Shehi Chachmasu Yizbarach, which is God and His wisdom. Hu Makar HaChayim V'Hatoi V'Hoinek, God is the source of life and good and all pleasure. V'Hu Ha'eden Shelamayla Me'olam Haba. In the Talmud it talks about Olam Haba, which is the Gan Eden, which in the imagery that we have, Gan Eden is the place where we bask in the glory of the radiance of God, whatever that might exactly mean. But it separates between Gan and Eden. Gan is where the world to come is, where we sit with our families and study Torah and bask in the radiance of God. And then there's Eden, which is even higher than Olam Haba. And Eden means pleasure. So this even higher than what we normally refer to as Gan Eden or Olam Haba. Rak mipnei she'eini musig, except, even though what is coming to us seems painful and unjust and causes great anxiety and suffering, that is rak mipnei she'eini musig, only because it is not understood. L'chei nidma lo ra o yisurim. That's why it appears to him that it's bad or that it's suffering. Aval be'emes, but in truth, ein ra yered l'mayla. Nothing evil comes down from above. V'hakol tov. And as we say in America, it's all good. Rak she'eini musig l'goydloi v'rav tuvi. The reason we don't comprehend it as such is because it is so big and so great and perhaps so transcendent that we, in our mortal ways, are unable to comprehend it for what it really is. And we only get the tail end of it, and the tail end, in human terms, seems quite bad. And this is the essence of the faith for which man was created. Lahamin, to believe, the less asar pani minei, that there is no place devoid of him. No place doesn't only mean a physical space, but no place refers qualitatively. There's no aspect of the universe. There's no aspect of our existence. There's no aspect of our emotional existence which is devoid of God. And in the light of the king's countenance, were we to experience that, there is only life. And therefore, in God's place, there is only strength and joy. Here again, we had a lot of biblical cliches interwoven into the text. And God is only good all day. Valkain, and therefore, Reishis HaKel, first and foremost, Sheyismach ha'odam v'yogel, a person needs to be happy and joyous, v'chol eis v'shah, at every time, v'yichya mamish b'munasi Hashem, and he should live, and he should live mamish, actually, in his faith in God, ha'machayo meitav imay b'chol rega, who gives him life and is good to him every moment. And now, a statement that is as blunt and raw as one wants to, as one does not want to hear when he's struggling with suffering. Umi shemisatzev u'misainin, and he who is sad and he is complaining, mara ba'atzmai, shows about himself, sheyesh loy ma'at ra, and he considers that he has a little bad and suffering, v'chosar le'eza teva, and he's lacking some good. V'harei zeket kofer chas v'shalom, he is as a heretic, heaven forbid. V'al kein hirchiku midas ha'atzos b'ma'od chachmei ha'emes, that's why the mystics, chachmei ha'emes means the wise of the discipline of truth, which is a euphemism for Kabbalah, the mystics distanced sadness and depression to the utmost. Aval hamamin lo yochosh mishum yisurim ba'olam. But he who has true faith in God will not be disconcerted by any suffering in this world. Ubechol inyani ha'olam hein v'lav shavim etzlein, in all matters, worldly matters, yes and no is equal to him. He has total equanimity. If this is what I am getting and it's coming from God, it is purposeful and ultimately good. To finish that phrase, hein v'lav shavim etzlein b'hashva amitis, yes and no, good and bad, are equal to him in absolute equality. Umisha ein shavim loy, and for him who they are not equal, all things considered, I'd rather have it good begashmius. I can accept this as coming from God, but between me and you, I'd rather have it good begashmius. If that is your attitude, that is my attitude, but I'm not at this level yet. Mara ba'asmei shows about himself, shehu me'erev rav, that he has in himself a little mixture spiritually of the erev rav, the mixed multitude that came out of Egypt, which became a scourge and trouble for the Jews. They had to do with the golden calf. And in the mystical world, there is the possibility that a person can have injected into a soul a little element of the souls of the erev rav. And they are described as dilagarmayo. They do things self-centered for themselves. And he loves himself. Lotzes mitachas yad Hashem, and he takes himself out from being under the hand of God. And he wants to live a goyish life. Bishvil ahavosay esatzmei, because he loves himself. And that's why he wants to live a materialistic life and focuses on family and on sustenance. Because this is better for him. It would be better for him had he not been created. Because the main reason for man's being created on this world is to test him with these tests, and to see what is truly in his heart. If his heart will stray after other gods, namely Shehem Taivas Haguf, which are the desires of the body, Hamishtal Shalim Mesitra Achara, which evolve from the other side, in quotes, which is the realm of Klippa, Ubahemu Chafes, and it is that which he wants. Oyem Chafse v'Resoyne Elias Lichyes Chayim Amitim, or does he want to live a true life, Hamishtal Shalim Melekim Chayim, which evolves from the living God, Av She'ena Yochel, even though he can't. And here there's some problems with the text, that's the next footnote, but the most simple interpretation is, even though he struggles and he finds that he can't live up to this high standard, but nevertheless he should aspire to that. All right, let's continue on line 3 on the last page. The Yamin B'emes, a person should believe in truth. The Yamin, and he should have faith that Shehu Chai Bohem, that he is living within the framework of this high standard. The Chol Tzarachav V'chol Inyonav Mishtal Shalom B'emes B'prati Pratiyusam, and that all his details, all his needs, and all the details of his life involve in truth, in their great detail. Shalom Yisiter Acher, not from the realm of Klippa, but from God Himself. Ki meHashem etzadei gever keinonu, because man's steps are prepared by God. In other words, everything that happens to a person is from God. Ve'ein milah, that's again a pasuk from Eiv. There is no words to be said, since God knows it all. Im kain, and if so, hakol teiv b'tachlis, everything that happens to a person is the ultimate good. Rak she'ein musig, the lack is that it is not grasped. We do not know how to bridge this abstract philosophical concept with real living in the world when we are suffering from whatever we're suffering for. If you want to have a little consolation, ube'emunah zu, and when one actually experiences this faith, be'emes, ube'emunah zu be'emes, and when one experiences this faith deeply and truthfully, naseh hakol tov gam begoloi, that itself brings about that things should become good also in a revealed way. Because this faith that he believes that what he experiences as bad in a revealed way, but he realizes that kolcha yusay, all of his life, hu me'atev ha'elyon, is from the supernal good, shi chachmasa yisbarach, she'enu museges, which comes from God's chachma, which is not understood, can't be understood by man. V'hi ha'eden shelamayla ma'elam haba, and that is the level of Eden, which is higher than the world to come, elam haba, which is gan, the gan of the Eden, but it's actually from Eden itself. Hare be'emunah zu nichlal u'mis'ala be'emes hara hameduma b'teiv ha'elyon hagonas. Through this faith, he elevates the truth that he is, the truth that he believes, and the experience that he is experiencing, which are in conflict. And he merits, if his faith is strong enough, he merits that God will merge the two, so that what he is experiencing is actual good, even in the material sense. This is not unlike, many of you may have learned the Sikha about Tracht gut vet sein gut. Lakuti Sikha is a very classic Sikha from the Rabbi, that thinking positive and thinking that this is from God, therefore it must be good, is more than just a mantra. It's a deep service, and it's very much articulated in that Sikha to say when a person has bad things happening to him, we say, Tracht gut, wird sein gut. He even made a song about it. Tracht gut, wird sein gut. As if you can accomplish that with a jingle. The Rebbe's Sicha, and people say that, and the Rebbe's Sicha, first Sicha, Lekutei Sichas, Chelik Lamed Vav, very deep Sicha, very profound Sicha, very understandable Sicha. It's deep and understandable at the same time, is that when you put your true trust in Hashem, then that transforms your suffering and makes it good. And makes it good not in some mystical sense, but it makes it good even in a real practical way. I think I'm out of time. I have 5 more minutes. Summing this up, I will be the first to acknowledge that what the Alter Rebbe is saying here, on one hand, is understandable, and it's reminiscent of, in Igeres HaKodesh, Siman Chav Zayin and Chav Ches, which was quoted many times since Gimel Tammuz. There's a letter from the Alter Rebbe about the passing of his colleague and his mentor, Mendele Horodoker, who passed away in Eretz Yisrael. He went to Eretz Yisrael. The Alter Rebbe was raising money for his community, and that had something to do with his arrest. The Alter Rebbe's arrest, because Israel was under Turkey and they were at war with Russia. But the Alter Rebbe is trying to comfort them by saying that a tzaddik's life, even when he is on earth, when he is with us, we see him, the Gashmias, we benefit from him, the Gashmias and Baruchnias, but we need to reflect that the tzaddik's life is a holy life. It's a spiritual life. The body is a conduit for something much higher. When a tzaddik passes away, regardless of the loss of the physical presence of this tzaddik, who he really is, his spiritual existence hasn't been diminished, it just went up to a higher plane. So, when we think of that about a tzaddik, when we think about the Rebbe and Gimel Tammuz, we can accept it. It's still difficult to bring it down into our hearts. We'd much rather have the ability to write a letter to the Rebbe, to see the Rebbe at dollars, to listen to a Farbrengen. But we can accept Chaye Tzaddik is not Chayim Besorim, but Emunah and Ava V'yiras Hashem, the Alter Rebbe writes. The life of a tzaddik is not a material life, it's faith and love and fear of God. And that's good for a tzaddik. The Alter Rebbe here says it's good for every one of us. Not only is it good for every one of us, it is something demanded of every one of us, and if you lack it, I don't have to repeat some of the rather stark and somewhat harsh words that the Alter Rebbe uses. Personally, I think to say that this is easy to incorporate would be not true. To say that Ruvain struggled and tried and perhaps achieved this is awesome. Just a struggle is awesome and humbling. And as in so many other things about Yiddishkeit, just knowing that there is a truth, and just knowing that there is a truth that we can aspire to. And if we achieve 5%, 50%, 90%, who's counting? As long as we're aspiring, and at least in our mind have the right vision, there's a vort, I think from the Alter Rebbe, maybe from someone else, that when Mashiach comes, there's a pasuk, "V'hasiroisi es lev ha'even mipsachem v'nosati lochem lev basar." When Mashiach comes, God says, I will take out the heart of stone from within you, and I will replace it with a heart of flesh. A heart of stone doesn't feel. A heart of flesh feels. And the Alter Rebbe says, I will remove the heart of stone. It doesn't say, I will remove the brain of stone. The brain is within our reach to change today. To bring it down into the heart is a challenge. So, does anybody know who is it from the Alter Rebbe, this word that I'm saying? Anyway, it's a Hasidic saying. This, and as I told you the story about that young man, when he learned it the first time, burdened by his burdens, the starkness of Laskil Chabina didn't comfort him, it challenged him. He got angry at God, maybe at the Alter Rebbe too, I don't know who did he get angry at? He didn't tell me who he got angry at. But he said he learned it 10 times over the next few months. And eventually he got into the realization that this is the truth. Did he experience it internally? Maybe, maybe not, but in his mind he came to terms with there are truths greater than our ability to internalize, and our duty is to struggle first to understand and to accept in our minds, and to let that influence us in a general way, in a specific way. That is our service.